Dude, we've done a lot of sound checks, huh? Together? It's pretty good. Hey everybody, welcome back to another week. This is your host, Rick Alexander. I wanted to get your ear for a minute to talk about some of the things that we have going on at Lionheart Radio and our umbrella company, Louaviv. So I have very strategically not brought sponsors onto the program because, quite honestly, I want to be able to talk with complete freedom. I want to say what I think is bullshit, and I don't want to feel like there's any kind of bad blood or money or anything in the back end kind of influencing what I put out, because I really want this to be a forum to make people fitter, happier, and healthier. And so in the spirit of doing that, I've kind of worked on these ways that I could curate our own economy where we could really vet the information coming in, and we could make sure that, the products and the information and the knowledge and everything involved is kind of on the up and up, and it's not what we would consider to be bullshit, like products with a lot of fillers or templated programs that are recycled from somebody else. And there's just a lot of things that I think that we could fix. And so what we've done is we've decided to launch a program called the Endurance Hacker Society. And when you decide to become an endurance hacker, you pay $49 a month, and what you get is weekly program that is user managed. So although it might seem kind of templated when you get the program, you're getting constant information, you're getting videos, you're getting monthly seminars of me kind of telling you how to implement these different programs and how to make it work for your physiology and your biology and your individual schedule differences and how you're feeling that day. And the idea is that at the end of probably a year of you being an endurance hacker, you're going to have so much information that if you want to go on and kind of go on your own from there, that you'll be very set up to do so. So the main idea of the program is that you kind of become this hybrid athlete between strength and endurance. I fully believe that someone that's following the endurance hacker protocol for 6 months or so can just get up on the weekend and go run a marathon or a 50K or go do a triathlon or go enter in a powerlifting meet. That's the thing that for me has made life really awesome, and I'm super excited to be able to share that with all of our listenership. Now, not only do you get the programming and then me kind of talking to you about it, but you also get 24/7 coach access. I guarantee you, with all of the people that I know through Lionheart Radio and Louaviv, if I don't know the answer, I can find out for you. So we're giving you 24/7 coach access to make sure that you are always understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it. You're getting the videos that are telling you how to implement it. You also get 20% off the Louaviv and the Lionheart Radio store, and we're launching a community forum so you can interact, you can actually talk with other people who are going through a lot of the same things that you are and who are like-minded. So I'm really excited about bringing the endurance hacker community together and being able to have this be a trusted, safe place where we know that all of the things that are coming in and all of the information you're getting are really beneficial information that are going to move you towards your goal. And this isn't going to be good for somebody that is looking for the quick fix or for a magic formula or pill, or quite honestly, there's a lot of people that maybe they do want to pay a premium, they just want to be told what to do. This is not that. I can promise you that. This is for the people that are willing to buckle down, put in the work, put in the intellectual time of trying to figure out why they're doing what they're doing, so that they can go forward and they can be a better human. And so if you are interested in this, head to luaviv.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Click on Endurance Hacker and sign up. And if you have any questions, don't be afraid to shoot me an email rick@luaviv.com, and we can jump on a call. We can talk about whether it's going to be the right program for you or not. And if it's not, honestly, I will steer you in a direction that will be more beneficial for you. So I hope you guys enjoy all that we have coming on. This is just one of many things that we're going to be adding, is the Endurance Hacker Society. Now, on to the show. All right, thanks for tuning in to Lionheart Radio with Rick Alexander. Today, I am joined by my buddy Chris. So we have a long kind of backstory together, but to make it all very short, we've kind of been through a lot of difficult times together, a lot of times where things seemed like they were coming really easily. We've actually played in a band together, so we actually got to play, and we were joking before off air about how we've actually done the sound check thing over and over in our lifetime together. But recently, as kind of serendipity would have it, I started getting into the ultra marathons, which everybody that listens to this show knows that's not really new. But throughout that process, Chris actually did too. He was actually looking at my post where I ran my first 100 miler and failed miserably at mile 70 and ended up getting pulled because I didn't make the time cutoff. And then in true just son of a bitch fashion, he just goes out and runs one. And it was super motivating for me because, I kind of got him inspired to do it in the first place. And then he just took it on. And prior to running that 100 miler, just to give you guys a little bit of backstory, the longest he had ever run was a half marathon in a race. And so a lot of people think that has to be this progression in life. And I think Chris has proven time and time again that progression doesn't actually need to exist if you have the right framework in place, the right mindset. And so that's the stuff that I'm really excited to get into today as we talk to Chris about how he's balanced having a family, having a full-time job. He's active duty in the military just like myself. And then at the same time kind of taking on these really big goals and how you balance these things, especially because right now we're in the first week of the new year. People's New Year resolutions have already probably started falling off. And so as we look to the year ahead, we got to figure out how the hell can we take these really big goals that we have, balance them with life, and be successful. So that's all of a really long way of saying, Chris, thanks for being on today.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me. We're trying to get this together, I think, for a while now.
Yeah.
Seeing how we're going to get together. And then as the stories start to pile up, I thought this was a good interim of like, hey, let's do this. And let's start cutting and getting say, hey, let's catch up on stories before the stories become too much where we're just hitting the wave top. So anyway, thanks for having me this morning.
Yeah, for sure. So also for a little bit more of a backstory, we just got a big snowstorm in Virginia Beach, and it's become an annual thing for us. The day after the snowstorm, for anybody that's ever, or you could imagine if you get snow in an area that doesn't get snow often, the place shuts down fairly quickly. And so we've kind of made it a tradition to go out that morning of the blizzard and go for a longer run. This year we did just under 9 miles. I think last year we ended up doing 15 in the blizzard.
It was 15. We saw folks on cross-country skis going through State Park.
Yeah.
And hop a 10-foot fence.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a good run.
So I think we got to start with the obvious, and this is a question that I get. Well, I don't get it as much anymore because people have accepted my ridiculous life for what it is. But why did you see this 100? Why did you want to run 100 in the first place?
The 100 we're talking about is the Zion. So Zion 100. Didn't even know hundreds existed. I'm sitting there in the restroom, and I'm reading my literature. And I'm like, all right, cool, Surfer magazine. And I'm like, all right, I've already read this article. And I flip over to Facebook, and I see that you are attempting this 100. So I followed it. So I followed you for a day or so. I think it's kind of how your posts went. And then I saw okay, wow, he's going through with this. And I thought, hey, could I do this? I don't know. I've never run anything over 13 miles. So my recollection, but nothing even in a formal race. So I put something on the horizon, followed you, and kind of the rest was history from there.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So it's just, and that's what I've started to find a lot is it's just that need to know, right? That's it seems to be the seed that almost all of adventure kind of grows from, is that need to know what's on the other side, right? Am I capable of this? Could I do this? And it seems like that was kind of just the thread that you followed.
Yeah, and there was so much more to it kind of on that as well, is that that was very exciting for me, is that it's not just you put your shoes on, your compression pants, open the front door, and then go roll and be like, hey, I'm going to keep a pace of whatever. It was the diet. How do you balance diet? This is what type of gear do you wear? How do you stretch? What is sleep deprivation and maintaining paces? There was this big tactician plan that you had to put together. And it was kind of hey, I'm planning race day today. How do I do that? And I've never had that ability to do that before. It's kind of just been very I'm going to let fate decide for me, as opposed to no, I'm going to plan now. And then, see if my plan is functional. Am I in the right spot?
Yeah, that is huge, right? That's what I love about big projects, starting businesses, running ultra marathons, trying to do something new, is you have this intense problem that you need to solve, which is I'm here. I need to get here, and there's all these variables in the middle that are going to try to fuck you up in the process. And so as we look at that, we mentioned before the show that when you Google how to run a 100 miler, there's 100 miler plans that will pop up, and they're they're not going to work for 90% of people because just inherently templates don't work. Like template programs, that's a very hard thing to take this very rigid structure and apply it to who you are, the infinite differences in our biologies, the lifestyle differences, the schedule differences. We don't have time to all go bang the pavement for a 50-mile long run like these 100-mile plans typically.
Right.
And that's probably what you found. And so you went about it a completely new way. Well, it's actually probably pretty similar to me, because the other thing that we should mention here is that you're not a light runner, right?
No. So, yeah, I was starting training, I was probably about 240. It's about what I am now. And then, as we'll kind of allude to later, race weight, folks think they get down to like boxing weight, what have you.
Yeah.
No, I was a race weight of 226.
It's not light.
Easy. I kind of base that too on, as opposed to like weight and how I carry my frame naturally, and how I run is a big question. Is what kind of runner am I? What kind of runner do I want to be? Do I want to be the Usain Bolt that's like breaking like track records, or do I want to be the guy that runs the Marathon des Sables? And I found that I want to be a little bit of both. I want to have explosive strength, but I also want to have the ability to go out and summit mountains and conquer what I need to do, and have that functional strength. So where do I find that? And I found that on the road to Zion, essentially.
Right. And so, and how did you find that then? From my recollection, when I was talking about your training process, you didn't leave the gym, which is something that a lot of people do. They're like, okay, I'll go back to the gym after I train for my marathon and do it or whatever. You decided, with a lot of the trainers at work, you decided to keep that stuff in there, right?
Right. So what I was more focused on was, it wasn't so much what was my pace. My main focus on is, how do I maintain vertical stability? How do I maintain strength and staying vertical and getting time on feet? And in order to do that, where if you've been around, like if you stood up for a long period of time and you're like, okay, hey, wow, my knees ache, my hips ache, my back aches. What is that? It's not that you're an out of shape person. It's just you're not training to be vertical. You could still be a great marathon runner and then ache, but you haven't trained to be vertical. So how do you do that? That was kind of like my centric focus. So lower back, posterior chain strengthening, something I think a lot of people, overlook. Feet strengthening. What is your toe splay? Are your feet comfortable being bare and exposed like to the elements? Like, can you walk around without them worrying about like the protection of a shoe or what have you?
Right. So that's something that you got into in your training that I almost overlooked in a lot of my training, which is like how your feet just naturally fall to the ground. And for people that are listening to this, you can go back and listen to the Foot Collective episode that we did, where he really dove into like how your feet should be naturally and how your feet are to blame for a lot of other problems that we have with the human condition now, which is like hip pain and knee pain, and how sitting in a chair can actually affect your foot and all these different things. But what were some of the things that you did to address that properly as you went into your training, I guess?
So initially came back, started thinking right back to, learning from the past. 5-finger shoes came out, and I was like, all right, hey, this is like the greatest thing ever when they first came out.
Back in the day, you adopted those, right?
Right. And if you remember, I was running on those a lot, like quite substantially.
Yeah.
And then as we fast forward now, we see that those shoes were not meant to be running for long periods of time. They were supposed to be something that was implemented into your training plan that like came out a little bit later. So I was like, okay, I've had issues with this before. I've run barefoot, feet not strong. Like, how do I do this? How do I figure this out?
Yeah.
But as I started looking into this, I started to find out that, drops in shoes, 12 millimeter drops typically are in all your shoes. What's the difference between 12, 4, and 0?
Yeah.
Do I have ankle mobility? I have injuries from work that I don't have the mobility other folks have. So how do I get this? So kind of looking into this, I was like, all right, how do I find this even balance? So what I started to do was find the right shoe. So I didn't kind of like you spoke earlier. What kind of runner am I? I'm the runner that I want to be able to run 100 miles. But then also in the same time, if I need to carry weight and feel like fast pack through Shenandoah Valley, for 20, 30, I can do that too. So how do I do that? And it all really started down with the feet. When people would ask me like, hey, how are you training? Where do you start? I always say I start at the feet. If you have an issue, what I found with me, if I have like knee pain or hip pain, I always start down on my feet, roll my arches out. Once I find that issue, if that doesn't alleviate it, then I'll kind of start to work up, because I found that a lot of times the issue is above or below the injury. So once
That's
I
a good point. That's a good point, right? It's almost always referred from something else. And you get these energy leaks in your body. So like a lot of times people are like, oh, my knee hurts. Like most likely you have some limitation that is occurring in your movement pattern, and that's manifesting in your knee.
And I actually went into a strength coach. This is kind of like where I went in. I was like, hey, my knee is killing me. What's the deal? And he came in there and he's working with my feet, my hips, and all that stuff. And I'm like sitting there looking. He goes, I know what you're thinking. Just let me finish. So we go, and he's got his Graston tools. And if you guys don't know, kind of like use the Graston tools like you would like a foam roll, like a plate, and you like just scrape the crepitus out of the muscle, and then get those red blood cells in there and what have you. And we get to the end, and he goes, "You want me to touch your knee, don't you?" And I was like, "Because that's where my knee hurts." And he goes, "Well, I'm gonna be a good physician. I'm gonna touch your knee, just so you came in with your boo boo, and I touched your knee. But really," he goes, "I'm gonna explain this to you." He goes, "Your injury right now, or you're not your injury, but where you're tight is in your arches, and your arches are tightening up the Achilles tendon to your calf. You're hinging on your hip." And he's like, "And the type of runner you are, I'm an underpronator." He goes, you'll see, like, if you look at your posterior chain as it goes all the way up, he goes, if you were to let this go, you more than likely probably feel this in your neck. Weather forecast, possibly, but, that's kind of where they're kind of based that strength coaching from.
Right. Yeah, I had a super similar experience where I got really into training after the 100 catastrophe I went through. I was training for my next one, got shin splints. Was like, oh, fucking, what do you do for shin splints? Not much. You got to wait it out, right? Because it's a bone injury. Other than the ice and the normal things, elevation. I went into a physical therapist. She works on my feet for an hour. I'm like, shin splints are gone. Okay, perfect. It wasn't shin splints. Same thing. It started in my arches. So that is actually a really good point. As people, I know a lot of people that listen to this have decided to take on ultra running, for better or worse. And through that process, when they start getting these knee problems, that's like a great thing to think about. Is like, is this problem actually manifesting from somewhere else? And when you talk about running, typically it's going to start in the feet, right? And that's what's absorbing the impact. At the beginning of this whole training process, you did something that I think is really important. You asked yourself, what kind of runner do I actually want to be? Because a lot of times I think in life, when we take on big goals, for whatever reason, we don't stop to think about like, where the hell am I actually going? It's just like, we like the idea of being able to be a 100-mile runner. So we take on a 100-mile training plan. We end up broken and lost in the process. You ask yourself, like, what kind of runner do I want to be? And so you probably wanted to maintain some of your size and strength. That was the process with me. I'm like, I don't want to be a 170-pound runner, 150-pound runner. It's just, for my lifestyle, I enjoy having muscle mass. I enjoy being strong. And so asking yourself that, it allowed you to look at these 100-mile plans and realize that they're not going to probably work for you, that they're going to have to tailor you. So I just wanted to shine light on that fact for people that are getting ready to take on anything worth a damn in life. Take that minute to kind of reflect. That way, if you're going forward, you're going in the right friggin' direction.
Right, absolutely. And there's not a lot of literature outside of what you've put together shaping these extended mile runs. And to get into what that average person is, what that average body type is, I'll use myself as the testament, saying that there is no average anything out there. You can have folks that are 110 pounds to, guys like myself, and it's just a matter of what did you do to get yourself, like physiologically, and mentally through this, and through that training plan. And, I think I've kind of answered your question incorrectly earlier when you had asked, like, hey, you're in the gym, what did you do to train? A lot of core work was huge. As you naturally run, you'll start to see, like, your hip flexors and your lower abs will naturally start to get stronger, but that can also cause a lot of problems too, in the sense that, like, as everything starts to get tighter in the front, starts pulling in the back. So then you have to do more work specifically on the back side, like upper glutes, lower back, whether it be back extensions, or even what I found to be remarkable was tying in a couple exercises together. So, for example, and I'll try to illustrate this with over audio, but for example, I would lay on my back and I would try to incorporate flutter kicks or leg lifts or something into as many exercises as I could. I found this to be a very similar exercise from the race that I was going to be doing up in Zion. So I would do like skull crushers while doing flutter kicks, doing individual dumbbell bench press, dumbbell flies, if you will, as well, with flutter kicks, doing these things. So on the bench, I'm sitting there, my legs are still working in this natural motion, but I'm also tying in all of these little ancillary and stabilizer muscles that you essentially wouldn't use unless you're doing this, climbing a mountain or pulling yourself up or pushing yourself over these things that you just can't get those repetitions on. And then how do you, where can you do that?
Yeah. So that's cool because you took something that's a single joint movement and you made it a compound lift, right? Which is going to have so much more transferability to a sport like running.
Right.
And so that's a very common sense approach. And actually, I really like that. I'm going to take some of those and add them to my training. And so what we talked about earlier too is that, you think about running as this bipedal sport where all you're doing is using your legs and your feet and you're running and you're just looking for that foot turnover. Well, when you look at something like an ultra marathon, now you're talking about poles in your hands. Now you've made it closer to cross country skiing than running, right? And so how did you go about kind of mimicking that process? Because, like what we talked about earlier is you didn't really see a lot of that built into a lot of the conventional knowledge that was out there for running.
Right. So looking into how to do that, I found with me incorporating like 5-pound dumbbells, and I know this may seem hokey. It may seem like the folks that are like running in place at stoplights with ankle weights and what have you. I get it.
These are the worst.
I get it.
Yeah.
But
fucking relax, dude.
Right.
The light will turn in a minute.
I gotta keep this race pace.
Gotta keep my heart rate up. Yeah.
Fitbit says turn around, right? But I guess we're doing this before even Fitbits. We're talking yellow Walkmans and Discmans with anti-skip technology. But what I do is I would take a 5-pound to 10-pound weights, depending on where I was in the progression and throughout the week, and I would just put it on an incline, and I would just walk, and I would just build up those shoulders, like get the shoulders used to like holding weight, and then like you can have guys. This is the funniest thing. I have a guy at work, and he was like, "Man, I can deadlift 600 pounds. I can curl this weight." He's like, "But I carry my newborn around, and my arms are shaking after 10 minutes." Yeah. Right? And you're like, "What is that?" It's the same thing where walking with 5 to 10 pound weights on a steep incline really changes how your stride and everything works. And you don't realize these things until you're out doing a race, and you're like, "Wow, I've actually got a Camelback on. I have water now. All my pouches are full. Yeah. I got this extra jacket, a raincoat, or my if they're the type of runner that wears like headphones, like I'm running different because I keep trying to tap my earbud in with my right shoulder kind of thing. And
we're talking over hours. We're starting to make a huge difference.
Right. So, you're doing we'll say 100 shoulder taps to your ear or what have you. Yeah. Those things add up. As silly as they sound, all of these things are affecting how you run and how your feet strike the ground and how your hips and everything is aligned. So kind of playing that's what I found is having that strength and just that mobility with moving my arms and that having the ability to pull my shoulders back and my chin up. And I'll get into this a little bit later if you want. And then how that chin affects where your feet strike the ground. Really kind of always gave me that sanity check that I would start kind of do every hour. So
yeah, so that was something we talked about while you were training, that change that I added to my routine. When you're in the middle of an ultra and it's starting to hurt really bad and the wheels feel like they're starting to come off, the first thing I try to do is I go internal and I just have this checklist where I go through and I start at my head and I talk about my chin tilt, and I got that from you, and then I go down to my hips and I go to my arms and I go to my knees. Are my feet striking under my hips? And I go through this checklist to make sure that, and I'll go over it 1,000 times in a race for two reasons. One, it gives me something to focus on other than how much it hurts.
Right.
And the other thing that it does is it ensures that my stride and everything is exactly where I want it to be, because as you alluded to there, the tiniest little difference spread out over hours and hours and miles is that's where shit really can go wrong for you.
Yeah, death of 1,000 cuts for sure.
Yeah. So what is the chin tilt?
So what I do, I focus on my chin tilt, and what I do is I'm not so much focused on my chin sticking out. I'm more focused on my chin, natural placement, and where are my knees in relation to that. So if you look at a lot of diagrams, how people are running, they always have this slight 15-degree arch forward, arms are at perfect 90, and if you look at where their knees and their toes are, even actually if you buy a set of ultra shoes there's even a diagram of what this runner should look like.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an arrow and what have you. Well, if you think about it, your knee should strike directly under your chin, and then your toes should never reach out past your knees.
Mm-hmm.
So you should never be pulling outside your knees, right? So as you're pulling in your heel, you never want to pull your heel outside your knees. So what I found is,
because then you're pulling yourself along as opposed to pushing.
Exactly. And more time you spend on the ground, slower you go. The idea is up in the air, the faster you go. Now, that's not saying you're going vertical, but you want to go horizontal, but more time in the air.
Right. Well, and it's more chance of injury too, right? Because the only time a runner can get injured is when the foot hits the ground.
Right.
So the less time you spend on the ground, the least likely you'll be to injury.
Exactly.
And the other thing with heel striking, just before we move on, is that you're like essentially slamming on the brakes every stride.
Everyone working against yourself.
Right.
You're trying to stop, and that's natural. You don't want it either.
Right.
So what I would do is I would take this as an assessment. I'd be like, all right, where are my toes striking? Are they striking under my knees? So I would look down and make sure that I'm never pulling out in front of my knee. I want everything to be leaned forward. And then my chin, just naturally, where you put your chin is going to be your center of gravity. So guys that ride dirt bikes, surf, what have you, where your chin is where your center of gravity is, no matter where you look at it. And you can always see that. So you're looking down, even if you think like if you're in a dirt bike and you're in the air and you're hitting a double, you're like in the air and you're needing to move your bike, where your chin is where you're always where you're going to end up and where you're going to land. Now, some folks might say, well, that's where your head is. Right, but you can't picture the top of your head, right? So you're using your chin as that direction.
That reference point.
Right.
So you keep your chin tilted downward.
So downward and forward.
Forward.
Right.
Okay. So if people are listening to this, are looking directly forward, you're thinking of your chin at a slight down angle, maybe like a couple percent, right?
Right. And not to the point where you're like tucking it in. You don't want to close off the airway, but more just as like that, hey, you're kind of like doing a little check. Like you should be able to run and then just glance down with your eyes and see where your feet are without having to move your head.
Right. And then the good thing about that is everything else will start falling in line underneath of that, right?
Right.
So how much, let's back it up a little bit. How much time did you spend, like, let's say if we could put an hour per week training for this thing?
I love that you said hours and not miles.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing, time on feet. Right?
Yeah.
So I would say, let's say here. So I would do, Mondays and Fridays were always off. And then I would incorporate heels in there. So we'll say an hour. I would do hours, 1, 2, 3, about 6 hours, 6 to 7 hours a week.
For training for 100.
For 100.
So that in itself is paradigm shifting, because people, if you, and I'm telling you, if you Google 100-mile plan, you are not spending 6 hours. Like, you're spending more than that just running.
Oh yeah, man! The first one I saw, it was like it didn't even have time on there; it just had miles.
Yep.
And if you go to like, hey, 100-mile race running program, thing is what I put in there, and you won't find anything to read on it. It just has, you go to images and you can find it there, and you look, and it's like, your first week it's Tuesday and Thursday, and you're doing like 10 to 15 miles, and then the weekends you're doing like a long, like 28-mile run. And then towards the end of this thing, I think it's like I want to say it's like a 30 week program. But when you get down to the end, you actually have a 70-mile run in there. And to me, I'm looking at this like at the very beginning, like, holy smokes.
Right.
What did I just get myself into? 70 miles? Like one, I don't think my relationship is going to like withstand me going and running for 70 miles somewhere.
On the weekend.
Right, on a weekend. Yeah. Hey, babe, the week was great. How are you doing? I'm going to go run today.
Right.
Not like just come pick me up somewhere.
Right.
To
all
include,
today.
Yeah, and then when I get home.
So I'm going to the gym for an hour. It's like, today I'm gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then when I get home, I'm going to be useless. So I'm going to be home just thinking about myself again for the rest of the day,
right.
Which to me, it just wasn't functional in our plan. So that's kind of why, looking back, I was like, hey, look at the time was the way to go as opposed to attempting that mileage.
Yeah. And then so for your long runs, were you trying to hit certain mileage at all, or were you just talking about like, hey, I'm going to be out for 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever?
So on the weekends, the way I broke it up was avid fan of sandwich runs. I'm not sure if that's like a keyed phrase at this point, but I loved it. It was,
what do you mean by that?
So sandwich runs. So wanted to get the time for the weekends, but how do you do that, right? I have kids, family, work, honeydews, house, what have you. So what I found is that doing Saturday, getting up early, doing your long run, so probably putting in about 3 hours, and then cleaning it up on Sunday in the morning, same time, with a little bit faster pace. And I don't mean like looking at your watch, but just kind of getting out of that comfort zone slightly and holding that for an hour. I could sandwich those runs without having to put a really, really long distance on or a really long time on Saturday and then having to recover on Sunday. So that gave me a nice continuous, more time on feet. Looking into the race, forecasting out, it was a 2-day race. So getting me time back to back, hey, we're going to do this, probably have a little sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
The body was already getting in tune to running Saturday, Sunday, longer distances, staying up and doing that. And it gave me the ability to balance life as well,
mm-hmm.
which is, as you probably put together, is really important.
Right. Yeah, the training for the 200, the number one thing that I did, I think if I look back at my training, the number one training session I had that yielded me the most benefits was I had a 50K in the morning, like an actual sanctioned event. And then I drove up to DC and met some friends that night for a 50K ruck march. That was like a fundraiser. Just happened to be that they were in the same day. That's hard, but for an ultra runner, not that hard. But it was just the fact that you're getting so many hours on your feet and you're getting the sleep deprivation. You're getting all of these different things.
Right.
And so that would be the most beneficial thing.
Right.
If you look back at your training, is there anything you would do differently or tweak to do it again? Yeah,
great question. And you could always say gear or nutrition, right? Because these are like always the things. Like if I go and if I open up the magazine and I want to get 6-minute abs, I need to have this equipment. Right. Or if I want to do this, right? No, actually, what I would do is something like very, I wouldn't say counterintuitive, but it's not the sexy thing.
Right.
I only had one gear, Rick. So that's it.
Yeah.
I had one gear.
Yeah.
I was a Mack truck. And that was it. So, and it was like when they're going downhill, right? That was it.
Right.
So
important to recognize though for an ultra. Yeah.
And I think that there's a group of people out there that have this capability, and they don't do it because they don't envision themselves as what they think the stereotypical runner is.
Mm-hmm.
So having this one gear, and what is this gear? This gear is a jog, a shuffle, right? So. Initially, it started off as a little fast. It was probably about a 10-minute pace, which was soon to learn, like, hey, the people I'm running with right now, pacing off of, are not doing the 100-mile race. These are 50 miles and 50K, so that's great. So Let's bring that down. But as we started to get later on, I started to get with more of the guys and folks that were running the 100-mile races, that I noticed they had two gears. And this is what I mean by that is, they were walking and like hiking a 16-minute pace. Well, at this point, I was with only having one gear. I could either jog a 12 or I could walk an 18. And this was like it was huge. That when it came time to walk, and I was like, all right, hey, I'm going to walk up this hill or walk down this hill, everyone would blast by me. And then when we'd get into like a really aggressive steep incline, I was like, all right, time to put my gear in, and then I would pass everybody up.
Yep.
And then they would come back down. I felt like, man, next time I do this, if I could walk a 16-minute pace, like I would be unstoppable. Like
right.
in my own to my own goals.
Get your hiking pace up
right.
there. Right.
I didn't have the strength in the gait, and only having one tool in your toolbox when it comes to a race where you're on your feet and you only have one tool was big. And I came by this one guy, and it was funny because him and his wife run ultras, and I ran into him the whole time. And you get to that first name basis, and you're talking, and then when you start to get frustrated, you kind of like don't talk to each other, you like space apart. But then it's nice to see them, 20 miles later and what have you. And he had like almost like with like a whimper under his voice was like, "You gotta walk, man." It's like he was like, "What are you doing to yourself?"
Feeling for you.
And then he'd pass me, and I'd be on like stretching, and he's like, "You gotta walk, man."
Yeah. Yeah, that's taking that feedback from you after you ran Zion when I was getting ready, because I had I think you ran Zion back in April, so I had quite a few months between that and the 200. So it was really good to take your feedback and apply a bunch of those things to my training. And that was one of the things I took from you, and I started working on almost probably as much or maybe even more than I was running. I worked on my power hiking under load. And if I didn't have access to things like hills and shit that I needed to train that, I'd literally go jack the treadmill up as high as it would go, get like a super uncomfortable walking pace, like 3.5 miles an hour, and then I put a vest on and I would just get it.
Right.
And I think that yielded more results. Like when it really came down to like just surviving in Tahoe and doing the 200 miles, that was probably the number one thing that I did to increase my training and my adaptation.
Yeah, and if you look at that too, and for the long haul, just even that mental reprieve of having like, I have another option.
Yes.
Mentally, like, let you go somewhere else.
It does.
So you're like, oh wow, this is really tough. I can go somewhere else. Even if you're walking and you're saying like, hey, this is my hike pace and it's uncomfortable. Well, I can bend my knees a little bit and then shuffle this out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't have, it doesn't feel like your race is falling apart if your stride is falling apart, right? Because for sure, like, well, I know that I can maintain this pace for X amount of time that'll allow me to like recoup some resources and then kind of like get it back into a run.
Yeah.
And so your diet, you want to get into that a little bit? Because it was, well, first of all, let's talk about your numbers. So your actual, like, you were really diligent, and this is something I wish I had done, but you really tested your like muscle mass and your lean muscle tissue and all of that going into the race, right?
Right. So I did a monthly DEXA scan.
Yeah. Which is what?
So DEXA scan is like, folks may not all have access to this. They're quite expensive, but it is the standard for body fat composition, lean muscle mass, bone. Like it even measures like bone density.
Yeah. Okay.
This thing is great, and it literally gives you like the no shit answer. Like,
yeah.
Hey, what am I at? What have I been doing? Is what I'm doing correct?
Yep.
Again, they're kind of pricey, but if you can get your hands on it, it's the way to go. I know they have other options out there that's not quite as good as the DEXA, where I know some gyms have like the I think it's like an IR mapping, where like you go and you have your arms out and they like circles around you and then kind of measures your body and gives you like circumferences.
Yeah.
I think initially this was designed for people to make like wetsuits or some like form-fitting suits, and they use them now in some gyms to they're really just to measure all of your circumferences and everything throughout your body.
Sure.
But anyway, so using the DEXA, I went into and I met with a nutritionist and kind of explained to her, she's like, well, what are your goals? I was like, my goal is to, one, as the topic of the day, I want to run 100 miles.
Yep.
2, I still want to drink beer, still want to drink whiskey. This may not be popular within the community. I was like, but hey, man, it is what it is. And I was like, and I got a sweet tooth. Yep. I was like, I don't have it all the time, but when I do, I do. So we started to look at it, and we found that if you get a high dose of sugar, concentrated sugar, and you incorporate this within 6 minutes of post your workout, you can double, if not triple, the protein digestion, meaning, or better yet, protein absorption. So what does that mean? So typically, 32 grams of protein an hour is what, kind of like the general standard is.
Sure.
So I would take this high dose of sugar, and then I had the ability to digest, anywhere between like 70 to 80 grams of protein without any GI tract issues. So your next question is probably going to be, where did you find this concentrated sugar? Right. Well, I'm a sarcastic asshole. So of course, where do I find this? I find this in a jelly donut. So the gym I worked at, it's kind of a Globo gym, but it had great club level treadmills. So when the weather was foul, it gave me that option to, it's just one step below a woodway.
Right. Okay.
But it also gave me the ability to eat a jelly donut in the sauna with all of my other fellow friends and New Year's residents, right? Yeah. So if you can imagine being in a sauna full of folks that are, dressed in trash bags and in CrossFit gear and what have you, and a guy walks in, a guy like myself weighing about 230 something at this time, eating a jelly donut, everyone's appalled, like just wasting your life. Right. But within the plan of getting this in, waiting my 6 minutes, and then taking a very high dose of protein and then moving about my day. Yeah.
And like what's really happening there is that you're causing, obviously when you ingest anything with a glycemic index, sugar, whatever, then your body's going to have this insulin response, right? And that insulin is what's going to help you store and process all of that sugar that you're eating. Well, one of the byproducts of insulin is that you're actually able to uptake more protein in your body. And so you're kind of like hacking that protein synthesis process by eating a jelly donut. Right. And we're talking post-race, right? Or post-event, post-workout.
Right.
Okay. And so what were were you religious about this? Like every workout, your jelly donut?
Every workout, I would have one, and it's great because not to throw too many brands out, but Krispy Kreme, you get these things by like 20 of them. After they make so many, they throw the rest of them away. You can get them at grocery stores, what have you.
Right.
But their dosages, I guess you could say, never change. Like they're always very much the same. Like, have you ever been to a Krispy Kreme and watched the factory? Like
know exactly how much sugar you're getting.
Right, everyone. So it was very like.
That's a good point.
It was very like prescribed, if you
right,
will.
Right, right.
And it was really great. I never had any variables, and I knew that I wouldn't lose the supply halfway through my race. I'm like, holy smokes, am I going to have to transfer to something else?
Right.
The bread, everything else is different. I want to keep this as a constant, so then
is important.
I can have that, and then I can say my variables are exactly this. So if I go and I have 3 IPAs at dinner, and the next day I'm like, I know it wasn't the jelly donuts, it was probably the 3 IPAs, and I can hone that. So next time I'm not going to have those on the long run day or whatever.
Yeah. So taking notice and taking account of all of the different variables that are going to show up in your training is really important, because as that applies to race day, like I've seen people like on race day do something other than what they trained.
Right.
And it's like you can really run into problems there. Like your GI tracts, like you mentioned, it's not going to be able to handle everything. And so figuring out what really works for you and being able to standardize that as much as possible is really important. And didn't you have it down to like, weren't you cutting them in half or something like that?
So I was cutting them in half. Yeah. If you go for the full donut, you get too much of the bread, too much of the sugar, and you get too much going on. So yeah, that's exactly what I would do. Is I would cut them in half, and then I would essentially, sometimes I would actually just scoop the jelly out and then not even eat the donut.
Okay.
And then like once I'd kind of get through the gym, then I'd eat the donut later with my protein and have you.
Okay.
But kind of one thing too, and whether this contributed or not, but before I would even start the workout, I would run on a fasted diet. And I know that I actually got this one from you, and trying to figure out how am I going to do this? Race day, if I'm jittery, or I know I'm not going to want to eat anything in the morning, like how am I going to set myself up to that? And kind of using my training program as like a big laboratory, me being the experiment, and kind of playing around with that. So sometimes coffee with butter, sometimes coffee with coconut oil. And I found that all of these took me a while to figure out, like to process. So what worked for me in the very beginning was actually having like a quarter dose of pre-workout. So just having that, and then just getting me up, getting things going, getting the metabolism, looking for fat, right? Like, oh God, we got to find food. It's not anywhere in here. And then slowly incrementing into the coffee with the butter. And I tried that from the beginning, and I found that, thank God, there's a 7-Eleven on every corner.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to get through this run.
Yeah.
I'm like, here we go. So pre-workouts actually got me through the beginning stages, so then I could transition off of that, get on the coffee. And I felt like coffee was easier to wean off of before race day, so that I could really get the caffeine that I needed when I needed it, as opposed to like a pre-workout. I think the pre-workout, you just get that instant gratification, which is like very appealing, especially when you're jitter. You want something now.
Yep.
So
yeah, the fastest way, and this is often overlooked in my experience, the fastest way to increase your aerobic development and your aerobic capacity is to make yourself metabolically efficient, which is the ability to burn fat or whatever your body has for a fuel source at the time. And that shows up. And since I've noticed that, like they've done studies where they look at time sensitive eating, where you eat in a certain window every day, like let's say a 6-hour window, so then you're fasted for the other 18 hours of the day. They found that doing things like that increase endurance, and that's what's going on there. The reason your endurance is increasing is because your body is learning how to use fat as fuel. So it's like once glycogen stores are all used up, you're not just fucked, right? You have another fuel source. And that's been huge for me. I mean, even this morning, we're podcasting at 12:30 right now. We ate after the run, but before that, we ran for a couple hours this morning, and or hour and a half or so, and I hadn't eaten at all. And I felt fine. We had a conversation throughout the whole entire run. And so people that are looking to increase, and you don't have to be an ultra runner, if you're looking to increase your metabolic capacity or your aerobic capacity, experiment with things like fasted cardio.
Right. And this is kind of goes into a good point of, I know a lot of guys that think like, all right, I'm gonna be a power lifter, or I want to be like a sprinter. Like I need to eat or I'm gonna get hangry.
Yeah.
Like I can't do this. I'm gonna lose my strength if I run. Like running is the enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I need cardio. Like how do these guys balance it? Well, kind of rephrase or going back to like the DEXA scans, like towards the end, out of all of the workout regimens I've ever had, I've never put on muscle like I did with this one.
Which is wild because you're training for an ultra.
Which is a running program.
Right.
So in the end, final DEXA scan, 24 pounds of fat loss, 12 pounds of muscle gained.
That's wild.
To me, It was like I didn't believe the numbers. And you slowly start to see it, and then by month, you're like, okay, I see this. So factor this in too. Half marathon.
Yep.
Doing this, like, okay. I think I called you that day too. It was like before Thanksgiving. I was like, hey man, I just ran a half marathon. You're like, oh, that's cool, like great. I was like, I think I'm gonna do Zion in April. You're like,
right.
What?
Yeah, right.
And so and this isn't 4 months. I'd never done a marathon. I'd never done like any of the like 50Ks, like no progression. Yeah. Like, and people that were like, that had gone to college were like to run in cross country, like, and still avid runners that were like haven't gotten to the point of even attempting 50s and 100s yet, where like they're like, you're just wasting yourself, right?
Yeah, you can't do
that.
You
can't do that. My wife's a physician, and she was like, okay, I'm with you. It's like, but these are the side effects are probably going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think like through this, she's like, okay, and she was actually a big part of my success. I will give a lot of credit to her. And like, my like boo-boos and ouches, and like, I say boo-boos and ouches, I'm like, hey, all my toenails just fell off.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, just kind of looking at it, just because you're a big guy and you're a strong guy doesn't mean that you can't be a great runner. It just depends on, back to where we started, what kind of runner are you?
Right. What kind of, how do you want to show up? What kind of runner do you want to be? So we have the fasted kind of runs and cardio in the morning, and then we also have the jelly donut post with supersetted, if you will, with protein. We got the compound lifts. All of the time that you weren't running, you have a lot of hours in the week that you're not running. And I know you have kids, and I know you have a full-time job like we mentioned. And you were going through some pretty significant life transitions at the time. Fiance moving out here, got engaged, all of that stuff. Or girlfriend at the time. So how were you eating? Did your eating change at all? Because I do want to get into like, how did we get to this point where we gained 12 pounds of muscle and lost to 24 pounds of fat? Is there anything else that you changed as you were eating you could contribute to this at all? Yeah, so fasted diet in the morning, as we've already mentioned. We've already covered the post-workout. I guess next question would be, how did I live the rest of the day? Yeah. So coming up after that post-workout, I would do my protein. Days that I would know that I was going to have a longer or more like strenuous day, I'd blend up some oatmeal, throw some oatmeal in there, just get something in my belly till lunch. And then lunch, I'd have a pretty solid meal. So I'd have a salad, I'd get everything I needed from there, almost like a farmer's breakfast, if you will. They usually eat at lunch, bigger meals, what have you. And then for dinner, it would be, I was on this berry kick, and it was awesome. So what I would do is, and some folks may not have the palate for it, I actually came to my nutritionist, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. She goes, where'd you come up with this? She goes, I think there's a name for what this actually is. So what it is, I would take a cup of protein, or I'm sorry, not a cup of protein, a cup of oatmeal, and I'd throw almond butter and berries and honey and cinnamon. But cinnamon goes in everything that I have, so whether that's a contributor or not. Okay. And then I would just simply microwave it, and then I would take it out, and then I'd throw my cup of protein in there. And then with that, stir it all up, and that would be dinner. So it was like a paste. You can add more water to it. Okay. You could make it a paste, depending on what the viscosity you would want to achieve. Yeah. But mine is a little bit more watery. I like to have it, Let's go over this again. Almond butter, honey, berries. So, and the berries are like blackberries, blueberries, and like frozen berries? Frozen berries. Okay. Yeah, and then what's great about the frozen berries, you throw them in, you don't have to worry about them going bad, because anybody's bought blackberries for like $5 for a can, you're like, I got to crush these today, or they're gone. Right. Right? So, and I would just do steel cut. So steel cut oatmeal, so you can get them, like $2 or something. Yeah.
and then a scoop of frozen berries. And I would just do a handful, everything, a handful of these, and throw those in there. If you wanted to add some nuts for your protein source, if that's kind of how you roll.
Yeah.
One big thing I did find was that putting the protein after the microwave, or if you're a guy that wants to boil it, put your protein afterwards, because the protein, once you heat it up, kind of turns into like a coagulated block.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you lose a lot of
denatures.
You probably lose some of that stuff too in that cooking process.
For sure.
So
yeah.
Just put it on top at the very end, stir it up, and then go about your day. It actually kept me pretty stable. So I would bounce this because who doesn't want pizza, right? So I would have something where I'd have like a pizza like on a Friday night with the kids, and I would feel like it would make me lethargic like for the whole weekend. I'd be tired. I wasn't recovered. I feel like I'd need coffee to counter it, like trying to like equal out on these like this like emotional like parabola, if you will.
Right.
And I would just, as long as I kept to my oatmeal in the evenings, lunch could be the same. Lunch could be like essentially whatever you wanted it to be.
Right.
And then breakfast is, you had to have it for the runs and such. But that dinner kit just kind of made everything sane. It was like a reset for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt filled, mind you, 230-pound guy at this time.
Right, yeah.
And I'm feeling filled, I'm feeling healthy, and I'm feeling strong. And I don't feel like
it's probably from the fat and the almond butter and stuff too.
Possibly.
It's a little more sating.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you cook it instead of blend it? Or
you mean like microwave it?
Yeah.
Because I'm lazy like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Just mix it up and eat it.
Yeah. That's kind of one thing too. And that might be like another conversation for you and I, Rick. But I think anytime you approach something, and I use this like as gospel in my life, is that anything you approach, is this sustainable? Even in like how I would run, or even in like my marriage and how as a father, like what I'm doing right now, is this sustainable? Can I keep this going at the pace that I'm going? And if not, how do I do that? So before I like sign up for something, I'm like, can I sustain this?
Right.
And then how do I sustain that? And how that ties into the nutrition piece is that I knew it was always there. I knew if I was on the road, no matter what country I go to, visit, traveling, whatever, it was always there. I could always make that, and I could always find that. And that was like, that was staple. What kept, the constant, if you will.
That's another thing. Like, I think if we could kind of like take all the things we've talked about today and condense them and kind of find a common thread throughout it, it's this sort of ability that you fostered to take a step back, look at what you're trying to do, and then figure out like not what all the experts say, not what people are saying you have to do in order to achieve these things, but just knowing yourself and your own abilities. What am I capable of? What do I really need to see happen here in order to make it? It's like a very common sense approach. I get it. Experts say I need to run 70 miles on Saturday, but I'm not running 70 miles on Saturday. It doesn't matter who says it, right? Same thing with like, all these different diets. It's like, what I'm telling you is I got time to do this and it works. And so I think just and it doesn't have to be running an ultra marathon. Like, you can look at very simple things that you want to keep in your life as you take on any big goal, and figure out what things you can do that are going to be sustainable, but still kind of move the football down the field.
Right.
Absolutely huge. So the Lionheart Kicker is the final question we ask every guest. And it's based on all the life experiences you've had up until this point. And it can be based on ultra marathons or kind of, whatever you want, really. But if you could give blanket advice, and we're guaranteed everybody in the world would hear it, what would you tell people?
I would say find out your ratio as a person, meaning kind of tie this into the sustainable piece. What do you want for yourself? What do you want for your family or friends? And then what do you want for all of those folks on the horizon?
Yep.
And then with that, you should always do like trajectory checks or self checks. So as you go through and you're moving on, am I where I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, all you have is your name and your family and your friends.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about balance, and people talk a lot about balancing. And I think a better way, when you have these different facets of yourself, like you just mentioned, you need to recognize that different areas of your life are going to require different amounts of times at different points in the year during different seasons, right? So it's easy for you to be, a little bit more selfish. Like me and Kylie, your wife, were talking about this before the show too, is like she's looking to launch her podcast and her brand, but she's like, this was the season of getting married and having this kid and buying the house. And so it's not necessarily that you have to balance everything at one time. It's that you need to kind of have everything be in harmony with the other things, knowing that as I let some stuff kind of fall by the wayside here, knowing I'll pick it up later on, and that I need both of those things in order to feel happy as a human.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time to
Thanks for having me, Rick.
share your journey with us, and we'll definitely, I'm sure, have you on the show later on. And you are training for something else in the future?
So the Bigfoot 200 is on the horizon. Here we are again.
Yeah. So after that, dude, we're going to talk about
Yeah.
what it was like to eat jelly donuts and run 200 miles. Perfect. Thanks, guys. All right, everybody. I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode and there were a lot of things that you could pull out of it. In the spirit of all things ridiculous, I'm going to leave you with a song by the band Midnight Lineup. The name of the song is Kate, and the reason it's ridiculous is because this is the band that me and Chris talked about at the beginning of the episode that we were in. And so if you want to hear 23-year-old Rick Alexander, this was it.
Your sleepy eyes when the sun pierces through, engulfed in cotton silk, satin and you, counting sheep in the afternoon. Close your eyes and I'll see you soon. Turn around, girl. Your shadow next to mine is fading away. Turn around, girl. As the sun takes the light, with the moon I'll stay. Turn around, girl. I feel that wisdom is on the way. Your Kool-Aid smile, I like your style. Kicking it by the beach, and I love for miles. In words we spoke, went up in smoke. Dreams of ever after, and things we said, in love we fled. Now bring such laughter. Turn around, girl. Your shadow next to mine is fading away. Turn around, girl. As the sun takes the light, with the moon I'll stay. Turn around, girl. I feel that wisdom is on the way. The time you see what was so sublime, from the start to the finish of the drop of a dime. Was it special? I hope so, because in my black book you're just another hoe. So here we go, down the same road. Every little memory flushed down the commode. Is it you, girl? I'll never see you again. Don't you